So this evening, we are going to start the evening with a work session related to the Lawrence Virtual School, and I'm glad to have folks joining us virtually, which is appropriate and right given the school we'll be talking about. So I will ask, I'll mention that Carol is joining us remotely, and Paula is home recovering from an illness, but sends regards and wishes she could be here. So I'll ask Patrick to join us and start off the work session. So the purpose of this work session is to provide the board an education on virtual schools so that we can make better and more informed decisions moving forward, and to make sure that we are understand better what a day looks like for our faculty and students and families in the virtual school setting.
Good evening. I'm Patrick Kelly, Chief Academic Officer, and it's our pleasure to provide some content for the work session this evening. Joining me is Zach Harwood, our new Lawrence Virtual School Principal, and as you can see on your screen, a number of our LVS staff members. And if they could come off mute and introduce themselves. We have more than we had at our rehearsal, so we'll see how this goes.
I'll start. I'm Lisa Like. I'm one of the school counselors.
I'm Michelle Anderson. I am a secondary social studies teacher.
And I'm Vicki Case. I'm a kindergarten and first grade teacher.
I'm John Gorman. I'm high school special education.
I'm Amanda Gorman, and I teach English and Spanish at the high school, and I help middle school Spanish at the bricks and mortar also this year.
Thank you all for being here. What we're going to do is Zach and I are going to give a short slide presentation just on some facts around LVS and Kansas virtual schools in general. Some of our teachers are going to help us out with a little bit about the history of the school and tell you a little bit about their schedule. But we want to save plenty of time for conversation and discussion as this is a work session.
Patrick, am I right that you would like to have an opportunity to go through the presentation and then save questions until after?
I think so,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, share this. Oh, there we go. So we're going to kick it off with a little bit of the history of the virtual school. And Lisa Like is going to help us with that part.
Thank you, Patrick. So like any good educator, I'm not going to read what's on the screen. I just want to share just a short bit of history. Even though I've been with LVS for 10 years, it began well before my time in 2004, serving 169 students. And when it opened, it was a K through 8 charter school. Then 1 year later, in 2005, the 9 through 12 programming was added, but we were not yet a standalone high school. And it wouldn't be until 2011, when K-12 took over, that LVS High School became the third high school in the district. And then in 2014-15 was when we became a district managed high school. So we have a lot of history that's probably not necessarily relevant to tonight, but I think it's important to know a little bit about the journey that we've been on. And then over the years, the LVS model has changed from that homeschool support program into a school that is both College Board and NCAA certified.
So I'm going to go over thank you, Lisa. I'm going to go over the Kansas requirements for virtual schools. I'm going to talk about a couple of these bullet points, but you all received in your packet information that comes from the State Department that covers most of these bullet points. I'll talk a little bit in a minute about enrollment and funding. Zach's going to talk a little bit about enrollment and how we do counts. Attendance and truancy and course credits and assessment. The bottom 5 bullet points. We are required to do communication with students and families as a virtual school. Student involvement and support services are part of the requirements. Professional development, and we'll talk about a little bit some of the challenges we've had with professional development and some of our plans to address that. recruiting and advertising in there. And LVS, just like all our schools in the district, has a school improvement plan and is part of our accreditation model. Start with funding. So it's set by law. It was increased just recently to $5,600 per full-time student. Just for reference, we get $5,088 per student for a non-virtual kid. And then that, of course, involves some weightings that you all are familiar with. One thing I think it is important to remember is if a student is not full-time, if any part of them are full-time, it has a big economic impact for us. That state aid drops to $2,800. So if we have, just to give you an example, 2 half-time students, the total we would get for those 2 half-time students is $2,800. But if either of them become a full-time student, we would get $5,600. So there's a big incentive for students to be in schools, in virtual schools, full-time. I also include the credit hour there. This is fairly new for adult students and diploma completion. For each credit hour that they take classes, we get $709. That's primarily through our diploma completion program and adult ed. Attendance and truancy. All students are subject to the same compulsory attendance laws and truancy laws. We have had conversations with KSDE about the MOU that's on your agenda this evening. They're very excited to look at that because we are responsible for students in all 104 counties outside of Douglas County and those truancy laws as well. Zach's going to talk a little bit about enrollment and counts and how we do that real quick.
So yeah, the counting procedure for a virtual school is, I would say, substantially more complicated than it is for brick and mortar. Whereas a brick and mortar, you have that count day and whoever's there, you get funding for. In the virtual school, we have to prove basically that a student is doing 6 hours of educational activity in one 24-hour period, one day before September 20th and one day between September 21st and October 4th. And while on paper that doesn't seem too complicated because we know our students are doing the work, we've run into, I would say, some substantial limitations in our ability to track virtual minutes. For instance, you'll hear a lot about our model where we do live courses. None of those are counted by the system. And so what we have to do in those cases is basically send home a form to families to have them sign off that, yes, my student was meeting the expectation. Here were the minutes that they were doing that the system did not count, which I know in the past has led to a substantial number of students that are full-time being counted as part-time by the state auditor. So that is something that we're definitely interested in improving on in the future. For reference, this year we sent out about 500 of those forms between the 2 count days. So it is a pretty substantial undertaking that I think is something we really want to clean up a little bit for years to come.
So credits and assessment. All of our courses have to follow local, state, and national standards. They need to have a syllabus with dates for each course. Zach's going to talk a little bit about how credit is awarded here in just a second, and then we'll go through our state assessments course.
And so honestly, credit for us is given much in the way that it is at any of the brick and mortar schools. After they have completed the course of study over the course of a semester, they get that credit if they have gotten the grades necessary for that. That is actually substantial. That's pretty different than what a lot of other virtual schools do, where it is a self-paced model where a student could, in theory, move through multiple courses over the course of a semester. If they were to, if you get them done in 3 weeks, you get that credit, you move on. We operate much more like a brick and mortar in that the courses are not entirely self-paced. There's a lot more flexibility within when they're doing the work throughout the course of a week or a month, but we are still everyone is following along together. So here are our ELA state assessments for 22 and 23. One thing that I would say is important to note is that basically 66.85% of our students in 22 and 23, or I guess, sorry, in just 2023 participated in the state assessment, which is substantially lower than brick and mortar schools. We are interested to see a little bit about how that will change now that the state is going to offer a virtual option. There are quite a few things we still need to iron out about how that process is going to work, but we're hoping to see increased participation rates when it's a little easier for parents. They don't have to travel several hours in some cases to take that test in person. Here is ELA broken out by subgroup. As you can see, I will say we have several subgroups that obviously don't show up. Most of our subgroups at different grade levels tend to be quite small at LVS. So as we go through this data, you'll see that there are some places where we don't see them. Here is same data for math. Again, you can see we score a little bit lower in math than we do in reading. I like to think that that is partially because, you know, in order to be successful in the virtual environment, it requires you to do a lot of reading on your own, and math, I think, is a difficult subject to sometimes teach virtually. Again, broken out by subgroup, math and ELA by subgroup percentage-wise is relatively similar, but you see, again, we have some of those subgroups that aren't represented due to their size. Science, we are really kind of right in line with the district and a little bit above the state average in science. Because of the grades that take science, we ended up with 73.83% participation in 2023. So those grade levels just participated at a little bit higher level than just the general ELA and math. Again, same things for just our subgroups.
So there's a number of virtual school models. One is a state-run and managed model. Kansas does not run our virtual school program. Florida is probably the one most have heard of. Iowa does the same thing. There are about 5 states that run state-run and managed programs. Kansas has school district-run and managed programs, and that's what ours is. Some school districts partner together, and others contract with a vendor or a service center. So Greenbush, which is here in Lawrence, has a large number of schools that work with them. Currently, there's about 111 schools that work with one of our service center on their virtual program. So just to give you an idea. In those virtual school models, you can have a virtual school teacher who provides that direct instruction. They support the online curriculum and provide specific assignments. LVS used to have a virtual course monitoring system where the curriculum was taught online, it automatically assigned grades or gave rubrics, but we have moved to a virtual school teacher with live class sessions. We've heard in our conversations with KSDE and others that that is the preferred method to give time for that live instruction. But some students still would rather have no instruction and just work through the courses. Sometimes you'll hear that called the Edgenuity model because that's the major vendor for that. I think we're going to have one of our teachers walk you through their daily schedule.
I know. So yeah, this is just an example teacher schedule. I don't know if any of the teachers online want to come off mute and just kind of walk us through what your day looks like.
I can certainly do that for the high school. Again, I'm Michelle Anderson, and I teach high school and now this year middle school social studies. So I'm happy to tell you about my day, although I can't really tell you about a typical day because there really isn't one in the virtual world. I spent 20 years in brick and mortar before coming to LVS, and I'm right now in my 10th year at LVS. So I was in the Lawrence Public School Districts for 15 years before coming to LVS. So I know the district well. I love the district. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. So with that said, teaching virtually is very different from teaching brick and mortar, and I've done both, so I can promise you that that's a fact. So basically, maybe half my time, maybe not even that much, is spent actually teaching my classes, preparing my classes, then posting my recordings after I've taught my classes. And that includes also getting my classes ready, getting the slide decks ready, the interactive activities, whatever we're going to do that day in class. I have 4 preps. This is the first time in my teaching career I've had more than 1 prep. So 4 preps. I teach U.S. history to 11th graders, as well as honors history. I teach US government to 12th graders as well as honors government. I teach 8th grade US history, and then I teach Native American history as an elective to whoever signs up. So currently I have 240 students that I teach. And so in addition to teaching, there's grading. And I do a lot of looking at assignments, giving feedback. It's not just auto-graded stuff for my classes. So that does take quite a bit of time. And I doubt that the grading actually fits into my 7:30 to 3:30 schedule most of the time. Usually it's evenings and weekends. But I think a lot of teachers are like that. So I have my classes, I have my teaching. In addition to that, there's obviously, as teachers do, checking on my students in my classes who aren't doing so well, making sure that they're understanding the material, reaching out. And it's not a situation where I can just go up to them in class and say, hey, you didn't do very well on this. Can I help you? Can I help explain this to you better so you understand it? It's reaching out, it's setting up a time to meet, that works with both our schedules. So it is a little bit different than what it was in brick and mortar. And then there's also, in addition to all of this, there's the piece of onboarding. So when we get a new student, it's not, again, they walk into our classroom and we say, hey, nice to meet you. Hey, class, do something for 10 minutes while I onboard this new student and get them acclimated to what we're doing. It's meeting with the student, oftentimes with the parent as well, in a virtual setting, setting up the time to do that, taking the time to do that. And when we onboard for our classes, it's one thing, but then we also have the homeroom model. So I'd say about half my time maybe is spent with the teaching portion of what I do, and then at least half is spent with the homeroom portion of what I do. So the homeroom portion is really, I think, what makes LVS exceptional. And I think it's one of the best things that we've ever done. I was here before the model. And I can tell you that I can't imagine losing that model. That would take away the heart of LVS. So with the homeroom model, each teacher is assigned a group of homeroom students. And with those homeroom students, we basically are their connection to LVS. We know them, we know their families, we meet with them every couple of weeks at least, sometimes more if they need it. We ask how they're doing, we form relationships. We meet with them, we talk with them about their lives, but also about school, how's school going. We kind of make sure that they're keeping up with their classes, and if they're not, we set up a directed studies plan, and then I'm going to check with you next week, and then I'm going to check with you next week, and I'm going to keep checking with you. And that's a big part of it as well. And in addition just to meeting with them, which is about 30 minutes a time, there's a preparation before meeting with them to see how they're doing. There's the after time to send a follow-up email. And then there's the after time after that when you check the follow-up email to make sure they've done what they were supposed to do when you met with them. So it's constantly, checking on your students, checking on your students, checking on your students. And it is a lot more work, but it is priceless. Like, I would not get rid of it for $1 million. And then again, with onboarding, when we get a new student in our homeroom, then we also have to onboard them not just for our class, but for all of LVS. And that can take multiple meetings for multiple hours because there's so much to learn. And so many snags to overcome. So in addition to that, I'm the student council sponsor. So we run our monthly assemblies, we set up and advertise and set up and take down our dances. We have 2 dances a year. And I think I said we do assemblies. And then I just meet with them every Friday just to talk about what we need to do next. So that's what I got there.
So this is just a list of our elementary curricular resources. We use several different things. I didn't know. You have any? Go ahead. All So for math, we use Zern. Math expression is an option that they use, but I don't know that many people actually use it. IXL for math, IXL for reading, and then Benchmark is our other primary resource. I know that one of the challenges that we'll talk about coming up is that some of those resources weren't necessarily designed for the virtual environment, so it can create some, I guess, some difficulty in adapting them. Here is what we use for secondary curricular resources. We use the FlexPoint curriculum pretty much across the board. We have access to IXL and a few other ancillary programs. And then for our electives, we use eDynamic. And these are just course shells. The teachers, as they'll tell you later, do a substantial amount of work making it more interesting, making it more applicable to their students. So this is just a look at what our enrollment has looked like from 2011 to 2023. This is just for K-8. Oh, actually, sorry, we had a question if we could share what the elementary model looks like. Go ahead, Vicki.
Thanks, Zach. So again, my name is Vicki Case, and I teach kindergarten and first grade. I have been with LVS kind of in several roles since 2006. I actually started at LVS as an LVS parent with my own 2 children. And previous to that, I had been a high school and middle school and elementary band director. And when I started working with my children here at LVS as a parent, I loved it so much and said, hey, I think I'd love to do this, and went back and got my elementary certification and came on as a staff member in 2008. So this is my 16th year here at LVS. And like Michelle said, we've had lots of changes. I've seen through a lot of these changes, but I just want to share where we are at currently in our elementary model. There's a lot of things that are similar to what Michelle said. A couple things that kind of point out that are specific to elementary is we do meet with our students on a daily basis. Each teacher works with their students in a classroom setting. Many of our elementary teachers will take their full classroom and divide it into a couple sessions so that we can really customize that live time with our students. Our live classes are very interactive, and like Michelle said, we spend a lot of time preparing, whether it's slide decks or materials that we're going to use on our document cameras, interactive activities that we're going to be doing with the students, looking through the students' materials and seeing what they're going to need to use at home. I think all of our elementary classes are very interactive in that we're having students responding and holding up whiteboards and doing things in their workbooks alongside my instructions. So there is a lot of prep time for our classes, but we do meet with them daily so that we have that really great interaction with our students. And I will be honest, when we first decided to go to more this live instruction model, I was a little hesitant. But I will tell you now that with all my heart, I know my students so much better than I ever knew them when we were kind of more that monitor type of an organization. I really feel like I know what my students need. I know when they are ready for an extension, or we need to back up and work on some things differently. And so I am really a big proponent of that live classroom model with my students. So we are meeting with them daily in a larger group setting. We do also meet with them in small groups throughout the course of the week for various, whether it is that enrichment or it is that just doing some different things with students with needs. We also, again, do meet with our students individually. And it's at least every other week. I have several students myself that I meet with weekly. In the past, I've had some students that I meet with them more than even once a week. It just depends on their needs. We don't have at this time have an interventionist in the elementary program. So each of the teachers in the elementary program are their own interventionists. So we not only provide that intervention for students in need, and we also take that time to even connect with our colleagues of ideas for that intervention, because like I said, we don't have an interventionist assigned to our elementary program. So we're providing lots of direct instruction. And then the other good chunk of our time, like Michelle said, preparing things is, and as Zach started to mention, our benchmark program, we adopted that with the district in our ELA. It is not designed for a virtual program. It has lots of digital options, but it's not designed for a virtual delivery. So all of my colleagues and I, we spend a good amount of time. We started this last year we use Schoology as our learning management system. So we go through each of the lessons and break apart. So just to explain what I do, I go through each lesson and I go, okay, what things do I need to teach as a direct instruction piece? And then what pieces can I build into Schoology so that our parents, we call them learning coaches, our parents, it could be a parent, a grandparent, working with a student at home, then can do that extra guided practice and that independent practice with the students at home. And so that does take a good amount of time. And I know, speaking from the primary level, we have parents who have come in that don't have that education ease. So I need to do a lot of explaining. So I might say we're doing some phonemic awareness things. I'm going to sit and give very specific instructions in the slides that I put in Schoology for my parents to follow through exactly what they need to say, what the student response should be. And so that does take a good amount of time where I can look at the teacher guide and know if I were doing this with my students in a classroom, I would know exactly what I'm going to say and what that response would be. So it does take that time to really develop that so the parents can partner with us. We actually look at a good description of several of our staff members is like we're just developing para plans for all of our parents. So every student has their own personal para to work with them at home for that guided practice. The nice thing also about Schoology is I can even customize my Schoology assignments based on that differentiation that I need. But again, it takes time. So if I know that a student is ready for a little higher level something, I can create that for that particular student and assign it out for just them. But then I also have to remember all the things I have to do for my general classroom. We have great attendance in our classes. I would say most of us would say anywhere between 90 and 95% of our students are in class every day because they do find it valuable. Our parents find it valuable for the kids to be in that live instruction. And then after those conferences, like Michelle, preparing for them, knowing what we need to work with our students. And then that follow-up is really important. In addition, throughout the day, I'm getting emails, texts, calls from my parents asking questions, clarifying, hey, tell me a little more about this assignment. Should my student do this? What can I do? Or how can I modify it if my student's having difficulty? So I'm in regular communication with my parents, even outside of those scheduled times. And so they're going to reach out to us. Another thing that's a part of our elementary program is we do believe it's important students have hands-on materials. So we go through that process of getting those materials printed through a print shop, dispersing them via mail, and that might happen off and on throughout the year. For example, I was in the district office today preparing packets for my students for some of my additional activities to go out through the rest of the next quarter. So lots of things go on along the day. And like Michelle said, there's no typical day. It's very different no matter what the day happens. So that's kind of a little bit of what the elementary program looks like.
Thanks, Vicki. So here is just a quick snapshot of enrollment from 2011 to 2023. And this is just for our K-8. As you can see, enrollment has actually been dipping for quite some time. I think 2012, 2013 was the largest average class size that we had. Obviously, it bumped up a little bit during the pandemic, but has been on a downward trajectory for a while. You can see in 2014, when we started tracking the high school numbers, it's been a little bit more all over the place, but again, saw a pretty drastic increase during COVID, and then has dropped off a bit since then. So here's the data that I really like to show because I was very, very excited the first time I saw it. These are our graduation rates. And so as you can see, there has been a huge amount of growth over the past 5 to 6 years. And I think, like most of the teachers will tell you, I think the homeroom model has a big part to play in that. To put it into perspective, in 2021 was the most recent average data I could find, but the average graduation rate at a virtual high school is about 54%. So we are substantially above that. Now that does go up to almost 64% when you're looking at district-run high school. But so, I mean, the work that the staff have done to get those graduation rates higher is, I mean, truly impressive. And they deserve a lot of kudos for that. Here is graduation rate by some of our subgroups. As you can see, there are some pretty big swings. A lot of that is because our subgroups tend to be pretty small. And so one student, one way or the other, can swing it by 33%. Um, Here is graduation rates by program. Again, our ELL students, we don't have very many of them, so it has quite a big swing. Free and reduced lunch is again a relative, I guess, a smaller subgroup than you might think. Part of that may be that because we don't actually serve lunch, there's less incentive to fill out the paperwork required for that, so that families that might qualify are not actually being counted that way. And another thing that I would like to point out is our students with disabilities. As you can see, in the last several years, there's been huge growth in their graduation rate, which I think is really excellent.
We only have a couple more slides here. This map shows you where our students are located. We have seen over the years more use of service centers out in northwestern Kansas. So we have seen fewer students in that area, but most of the students we serve are right here in Lawrence or in Kansas City. Couple of talking points, maybe bullet points for us to continue the discussion as a work session. Professional development has been a challenge. I will share that I think during the pandemic, we sort of learned about being able to communicate online. And so we thought, oh, let's all do this. LVS had been doing that for quite some time. That was nothing new to them. So we thought, well, we could just put a laptop in the room for professional development and it'll be the same. You all have probably experienced something like that. It doesn't work very well. And so we sometimes did not provide the best professional development we should for our LVS teachers. We are continuing to work on special education. The state is very interested in special education and how we're providing those services in a virtual setting. We need to keep working on the staffing ratio. We are working with other districts to understand what their staffing ratio is, but it's very different for different districts because the model is different. Not all of them have a homeroom model. Not all of them teach live classes. Some have very large numbers, and they're using that Edgenuity model where students are going through the curriculum on their own and they're grading on their own. So that's a good topic for conversation. And then some opportunities. Who is the right fit? Sometimes we get students coming to LVS who may not be as successful in LVS for a number of reasons. They may like to try it, but we need to make sure that the students that are coming to LVS are going to be successful there, or at least with interventions, we can help them be successful. We have some ideas around part-time students and brick and mortar. As you saw, part-time students are not cost effective for us, but sometimes that's the right thing for those kids. And sometimes it's solving some challenges we've had with finding staffing, such as our Spanish program this year. And then Dr. Engelbrecht has done some good work working with Zach and his team around physical space to make sure they have space to do the things that Vicki talked about. They have space for student activities, they have space for staff meetings and those types of things. So we're going to take it off this screen and open it up, and maybe these are some things to chat about or ask questions of staff, or Zach and I are certainly available for questions as well.
Okay, so I want to remind the board that we have a published hearing as we move into these discussions that starts at 6. So if there's something we do not get to, want to make sure that we are getting all the information we need. So we will direct questions in a transparent way to both Patrick and Principal Harwood to make sure that if anything doesn't get addressed tonight, we have opportunity. I mean, obviously, this is an ongoing conversation. We won't get everything answered tonight, even if we had all the time. But I did want to recognize that in terms of just honoring everyone's time. So with that, thank you to all the educators in particular, and Principal Harwood and Patrick for putting this together. I'm going to open it up to board members.
I just have one question that's probably is very specific and it's probably a very small population piece, but in terms of funding, if there's a half-time virtual student who's half-time brick and mortar in our own district, how does that funding work within the district?
So kind of the way it works is the brick and mortar school gets to claim minutes first. So more often than not, a lot of our students who come to us part-time from within the district, they're really taking one class, maybe two. And so for the most part, the brick and mortar claims all of those minutes. And so LVS doesn't actually get any direct funding from that. Yeah.
Carol, I'm recognizing you're online too, so feel free to jump in whenever. And then other questions?
I don't have a question, but I just would like to thank members from LVS for their presentation. It was very thorough, and GR actually beat me to my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Okay. Go ahead.
Do we do recruitment, or how do we handle that?
So we have done some advertising in the past, and I think there will be those who think that we need to continue to do advertising. And I think we need to figure out like what's the bang for the buck on advertising. The best advertising is word of mouth and families talking to other families. I know, and maybe some of our virtual school teachers can talk about maybe the history. Thanks, Amanda. Talk about a little bit of the history of that and how we've recruited in the past for LVS.
Hi, I'm Amanda Gorman, and I have been with the virtual school since we opened in '04. And I remember back a long time ago, we would have information sessions at libraries and meet families that way. We would take our K-12 curriculum and just meet families and talk about what we did and what our curriculum was. And honestly, yeah, across the state, we would do that across the state because it was a need across the state. We would be in Wichita, we would be in Salina, we would be in Manhattan, we would be in Topeka. We would have, all kinds of sessions like that. And then later on, we would do online sessions through Blackboard Collaborate, where we would have information sessions throughout the spring, really, and then in the summer to invite families to see what we were about. And yeah, I do think word of mouth, and I do think, where families can come and talk to teachers and ask questions and see what we're about and hear what we have to offer for them. Yeah. Anyone else want to chime in, Vicki?
Yeah, I agree with Amanda that has been probably our best way to connect. Several years ago, I'm not even sure which year, but we did a survey amongst our parents and asked them, how did you hear about LVS? What's the best way that you got connected? And it really is word of mouth. Somebody starts with LVS and they tell their sister or they tell their best friend at church. But when we get that opportunity to go out and talk to families, I've spent many a summers out on the road, doing those information sessions like Amanda said, or when we were partnered with K-12, part of our budget that went to them was for advertising, and they would set up events. Maybe we were at the water park in Derby, or we went to Cowtown in Wichita, and we helped sponsor the cost of folks to even come to the activity. Because sometimes, when you provide a little something to get them to come, then you get that opportunity to talk with them. Not that we need to go that model, but getting those opportunities to get out in front of families. And we do have so many opportunities to even do those information sessions, like Amanda said, via Zoom or WebEx. We started doing a lot more of that during the COVID times, just because we couldn't obviously be out face to face. Lisa and I have done a number of those kinds of online sessions where we just invite families to come and learn about our school. And so I think when we get those opportunities to talk to people is where we garner our best bang for the buck.
I can say for me, it might be helpful if I could visit a classroom, and I'm wondering about whether or not that's something that could be coordinated and not be disruptive to students, because I'm recognizing it sounds like every minute counts based on how you're describing your days. So I wouldn't want to be disruptive, but I don't think since I've been on the board, I've had opportunity to visit virtual school classrooms during COVID. But I actually didn't visit one within the virtual school proper. So I'm wondering about whether or not that's something that could be facilitated for board members. And it might help us, for the type of learner I am, you might appreciate this as educators, it would help me to see it Would that be
Absolutely.
facilitation? Okay.
Yeah.
And I would imagine other board members would be interested in that as well. So in a time that makes sense for you all. I'm also curious about the caseload. So the student caseload, as it was described at the high school, was very high. And I know our high school teachers and brick and mortars also have high caseloads, and that's true across the state. You talked about how that can vary based on model. It still seems like when I'm hearing the split between the homeroom and then the other teaching responsibilities, it concerns me. Can you talk a little bit about how that's managed, or maybe the teachers can talk a little bit about, and then I guess I missed the caseload for elementary educators in middle school.
So I would say probably having whichever teacher wants to jump on to kind of describe what they do with their homeroom might be the best place to start. And then we can kind of go from there.
Okay, sure. So I'm the high school social studies teacher, and I have 4 preps, so 4 different classes that I teach, and I teach twice a week, but each time is a prep, you know, for 4 different classes. And within those 4 classes, I have 240 students. So a lot of my grading is not during my work, my work day. It's evenings and weekends. And I Sunday is pretty much a work day for me too. Sunday evening. That's just sort of a set aside, in hope that, a good football game's on. But so that's a big part of managing it, is just knowing I can't do it all during the allotted time to get it done. And then my homeroom is the same way. I have some students who are just, doing what they need to do, and I don't really have to check on them very often, but I have some who, if I don't stay on top of them, they kind of start to slack off. And so I really need to stay on top of them. And so that's another thing that I often do in the evenings or whatever, is just check and see how they're doing. Maybe shoot them an email, say, hey, tonight would be a good night to do this or that assignment. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Unfortunately, it does. I mean that to say that I certainly don't want you to be grading on Sunday evening. So I'm recognizing that as a challenge, and I know that's not something we can resolve tonight, but I just wanted to name that, having heard it. I didn't want it to just sit there like we didn't. So I appreciate that explanation. With the elementary ed, can you tell me a little bit, or middle schools, about your caseloads?
In the elementary, I think probably amongst my team, we have anywhere from, well, I have 22 up through about 30 in our classroom. So it's pretty similar to a brick and mortar classroom, but there's many more pieces. Again, not only, so it's almost like when we think about we're connecting not only with students, but also with parents on a regular basis. I wouldn't necessarily say it's double, but there is a lot more to it than just teaching that class. And I think I can speak for my team that none of us are making it all work between 7:30 and 3:30 either. There's many a nights and weekends that I know I'm still working on things.
Thank you for sharing that.
Could I say something too? I just also want to, I guess, emphasize the homeroom model, and that because of the reductions this year, our teachers had to pivot and take on more homeroom students. Some of them did than what they normally would. Like, in my opinion, a good homeroom class size is like maybe 25 to 30. Amy Riley took on the entire senior class, like 95 kids, and I'm helping her. But you can't do justice to our model, when you're trying to serve 95 students plus all of your content students.
And I hope this doesn't get me in trouble, Mr. Harwood, but I took Thursday off. I actually put in an absence so I could grade.
Me too. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I appreciate you, naming that it might get you in trouble, disclosing that. Obviously, again, that's not something that the board wants to hear, but also good for us to hear. So thank you for putting that out there in this space so that we can think about that when we're making decisions related to budget and staffing. Thank you. Other couple questions?
I think it would be helpful for board members, not only hearing about what your day looks like from the teaching side is really helpful, but it might also be helpful for board members to see what a student schedule looks like, because I know from experience as a parent at LVS, it looks a lot different than brick and mortar school for a student. So if that's possible, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. I can actually just ask a few students to map out what their day looks like and hand those or pass those on.
Okay. And then I'm glad Kelly asked the caseload questions, because I had some questions about that. I'm still wanting to understand a little bit about what LVS is for our district in the broader picture of what virtual schools are in Kansas. I read through the guidance document from KSDE, and there are a lot of virtual schools and programs listed in there. And Patrick, I think you said at the beginning that our model is a live instruction model, and that's not true of all those programs and schools. Are we fairly unique in that way in comparison to the other schools that are operating around the state? Are there a handful that are doing something like what we are doing? Are there particular models that are like us that, as a board member, if I want to dig a little deeper, you would recommend I look at?
So I can answer that a little bit. So yeah, I think that we are very unique in what we do. I think most schools, and I don't have an exact number, do a self-paced, kind of that edgenuity model. The school that I've been told is the closest to us is the Manhattan Virtual School.
Okay.
I've actually been trying to connect with them a little bit so I can learn a little bit more, but they are who I've been told is the closest to us.
Okay. And that long list, and Patrick, this is maybe a question for you. That long list in that guidance document, are most of those standalone schools? Are most of them programs?
ASTE used to do a lot more programs. They have moved most of the programs to being schools. So we asked KASD for a list. We were trying to get a historical number of how many districts had virtual schools so we could compare it to our enrollment. They only could give us till 2017. So there's been some changes there. But in 2017, there were 19 virtual schools. Today, there's 64 virtual schools. Now, you would say, like, did all these open up? That's not necessarily true. Some of them were virtual programs, so they were a program within a school. But the challenge of having a program within a school is some of the accountability data isn't there. So you're not looking at the graduation rate of those virtual school students. You're not looking at the test scores of those virtual school students. And I think, go ahead.
I was going to say, can you expound on that? Because I thought that was a really interesting piece of the manual, was this distinction between a program and a school. Can you explain about that a little?
KSDE has really moved all virtual school programs to being at service centers. So Greenbush, like I said earlier, has a virtual school program, and then smaller school districts, 111 smaller school districts, they could come to, those students could come to LVS, or they could go to Greenbush. It's wherever they want to go. But Greenbush has that program. It's serving those kids in those other districts, but they're not creating their own schools. Usually, I mean, it requires a principal and and if you only have 3 or 4 kids who you think that might be better for, that might be something a little
So
different.
then the data about those students that are in the programs, where is that data reported?
So
In their home district?
that would be in their home district. So if they were in school district A, they would be part of that. That's similar to our college and career center, where we have students who go to that site, but we still keep their data through Lawrence High or Free State High School.
Do we have other things that we do in our district that are programs like that, where their students are going and getting something somewhere, but their data is reported somewhere else?
Well, I mean, I think you could say our Montessori program, we have a program within New York Elementary, right? All the data is reported from New York Elementary.
Okay.
I think that would be one.
What about our pre-K programs?
Yeah, I think that would be another one.
So where do our pre-K students get reported? They get reported at New York, right?
I think so. I'm going to look back to Kevin. Yes.
So all the pre-K students that attend it currently at
New York.
at Kennedy
Kennedy.
Early Childhood, they're actually being reported to the New York building, and that's a KSDE program reporting thing. So would they have been reported at Kennedy when Kennedy was in elementary school? Most likely? Okay.
Most likely, yes.
And that's because you have to have a building code to
Mhm.
report. Okay, all right. That makes a lot of sense. So that's why College and Career Center doesn't have its own building code.
Correct.
Those kids are reported back at their,
Right. It's why you don't see in your building report cards, a report card for that building, because they specifically are still attached to Lawrence High. And
but that's why it was a big deal when LVS became a standalone high school, because it has its own. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. I think that's really important in order to understand the trajectory of the data over time.
I have one enrollment question related to LVS. As we see we see some decline and potentially someone could infer that likely is related to the expanding number of virtual schools within the state. That's one explanation for that seems likely to be playing a significant role. But I'm wondering, does the district have an enrollment goal for LVS, a spot that would be kind of a sweet spot for the district as it relates to staffing, as it relates to funding, when you think about the considerations for part-time students versus full-time students? I'm just wondering about how you market and target enrollment. And if there's not a plan, that's perfectly fine, but that does seem like something in the context of the declining enrollment that could be helpful strategically.
yeah, maybe I'll start and then Zach, if you want to pick it up. I think what we want to do is serve as many kids who think that our LVS model works for them. That's really what it's about for me, is that making sure that we have a model that will give kids the academic preparation, the social emotional preparation, the behavior, all those things in a virtual setting. What I want to be cautious of is recruiting kids who it may not work because we get the dollars for those kids.
Yep, that makes sense.
Because I think sometimes that can be more costly than taking a kid who it really fits well for. We end up doing a lot of interventions, a lot of Zach's times, counselors' times, teachers' times, trying to get that kid to follow the program.
That really speaks to me. I guess I was more thinking about targeting students for whom we knew virtual school was where they were going and how we might encourage them to come to, I guess it was like the on the road recruitment that Amanda and at least one other educator was talking about. And that might not be the plan. That probably doesn't make sense in this context, but that's how I'm glad that you said that. That's a really important point, and thank you for making it.
One of the things in that advertising section is we do have to notify superintendents of any district that will be traveling to
Sure.
recruit, and we
You know,
just have to notify them.
Patrick, there was conversation around where we recruit at. We do not recruit outside of the state, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And then other questions? I'm recognizing the time I have. You have one more?
No, go ahead.
I have a couple other questions that I'll be emailing to ask for additional feedback about, or just to better understand your work. And I appreciate everybody that I recognize the front row as well as the folks that are virtual. So maybe you're texting with your colleagues, but they are here supporting you in person if you are here virtually reporting. And I'm grateful to be on the site council this year and to get to see your first year, for which I've heard very positive things about your leadership. So I'm actually looking forward to seeing where LVS goes. I feel like this is the beginning of a conversation with the board that is really well needed. And I appreciate those of you that asked us to have it so that we can start being better stewards. So thank you. Anyone else? 4 minutes. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Appreciate you being here.